Emotion was never the enemy. That's the lie you were taught later. The real danger was that your emotion was visible before you ever understood its value. From the moment you could feel deeply, you were observed, not protected, observed, watched quietly by people who learned early how to read faces, pauses, tone shifts, breathing patterns. You thought emotion made you human. They knew it made you readable. Every flicker of excitement, every crack in your voice, every delayed response became data. And data, in the wrong hands, is leverage. This is how power first enters your life without announcing itself. It doesn't arrive with cruelty. It arrives with curiosity. Someone listens a little too closely. Someone asks the right questions at the wrong time. Someone notices when your energy changes and stores that information instead of responding to it. You feel seen. You mistake that for safety. That mistake costs you years. Because emotion does not protect you in a world that rewards prediction. It exposes you. Long before manipulation becomes obvious, it begins as pattern recognition. You react, they record. You explain, they adjust. You vent, they map your limits. This is not paranoia. This is human nature stripped of romance. You were never punished for feeling. You were exploited for broadcasting it. The first time you were hurt deeply, you didn't just feel pain. You revealed how you break. And someone noticed, not with malice, with interest. The kind of interest that calculates rather than tears. From that moment on, every unfiltered reaction became a signal flare. Anger showed what provokes you. Sadness showed what weakens you. Joy showed what motivates you. Fear showed where you'll retreat. Love showed where you'll surrender control completely. You didn't lose power because you were emotional. You lost it because you never learned to conceal the timing, direction, and intensity of your inner world. In nature, the creature that reacts openly is not more alive. It is more vulnerable. Predators don't attack the strongest animal. They attack the most predictable one. And predictability is built from emotional consistency. Humans are no different, only quieter about it. The office, the relationship, the family, the friend group, the social hierarchy, they all function on the same invisible law. Whoever feels the most openly gives away the most information. Whoever gives away the most information gets managed. You've felt this without naming it. The moment someone changes their behavior after you open up, the subtle shift in tone once they know what you want, the way people test boundaries after learning where your emotions spike. You thought honesty would bring closeness. It brought strategy, not because people are evil, but because awareness creates options. And options create power. You were never betrayed by a villain. You were outplayed by someone who stayed calm while you stayed expressive. Emotional transparency is sold as courage because it benefits systems that need compliant, predictable participants. The more you reveal, the easier you are to steer. This is why emotional people are praised publicly and sidelined privately. They are useful, not dangerous. They react on schedule. They explain themselves. They seek understanding. They fill silence with meaning. Silence terrifies them because silence doesn't validate their feelings. But silence is where power consolidates. The person who does not react immediately forces others to guess. Guessing creates discomfort. Discomfort shifts control. When you express emotion without restraint, you remove uncertainty. You hand people a map of your internal terrain and then wonder how they navigate it so easily. You call it intuition. It's reconnaissance. You feel drained after certain interactions, not because they were intense, but because you leaked something valuable. Emotional energy isn't infinite. When it's extracted repeatedly, you don't feel used. You feel empty. That emptiness is not depression. It's depletion from constant exposure. And the most dangerous part is that you were conditioned to believe this is virtuous. That being emotionally open makes you authentic. But authenticity without boundaries is not strength. It is accessibility. And accessibility invites control. The world does not reward depth of feeling. It rewards command of expression. The people you fear, the ones who seem untouchable, calm under pressure, unbothered by chaos, they feel just as deeply. They simply don't allow their feelings to travel outward on demand. Their inner life is private, curated, delayed, weaponized only when necessary. They understand that emotion is not meant to be shared equally. It is meant to be deployed selectively. You were never meant to shut down. You were meant to regulate. But regulation is never taught to those who are easiest to guide through guilt, morality, and empathy. So you learn to confess instead of conceal, to react instead of observe, to explain instead of let others sit with uncertainty. Every time you rushed to clarify, you reduced your leverage. Every time you sought emotional resolution, you surrendered positional advantage. Power doesn't rush. Power waits. Power lets others reveal themselves first. The cruel truth is that the world does not meet your vulnerability with equal vulnerability. It meets it with assessment. Even love begins with observation. Who feels more first? Who invests more? Who ingests more? The imbalance decides who leads and who follows. This is not cynicism. It is structure. Emotional expression is not wrong. Uncontrolled emotional broadcasting is costly. Once you see this, you can never unsee it. You start noticing how often people ask questions not to understand, but to locate your pressure points. You see how sympathy is sometimes a probe, how comfort can be a test, how validation can be bait. And you realize that the reason you felt powerless in moments where you were being yourself is because you were showing your hand in a game where others were still counting cards. The coldness you fear is not cruelty. It is containment. It is the discipline of keeping your internal reactions from becoming external instructions for others. When you stop reacting on cue, people lose rhythm with you. When they lose rhythm, they lose control. This is when the dynamic shifts, not loudly, quietly, subtly. They can no longer read you. They can no longer predict your next move. You become heavier in the room without speaking more, scarcer without leaving, and that scarcity creates gravity. The moment you realize emotion is a resource, not a confession, you begin to feel something unfamiliar, space. And in that space, something else waits. Something you haven't faced yet. Because if emotion has been used against you this whole time, the next question is far more unsettling. Who taught you to give it away so easily? Emotion was never designed to protect you. That belief was installed later, layered gently over your instincts so you would mistake exposure for courage. In reality, emotion is raw signal. It broadcasts timing, intention, hunger, fear, attachment, and limits. In any system where humans compete silently for influence, attention, status, or control, signals are not comforted. They are decoded. The weak are taught that emotion will bring rescue, empathy, fairness. Predators learn something else entirely. Emotion is a map. It shows where to push, when to wait, how long to apply pressure, and when resistance will collapse on its own. This is not about monsters hiding in shadows. This is about ordinary people responding to incentives they may not even consciously recognize. Long before manipulation becomes deliberate, it begins as pattern recognition. Someone notices how quickly you respond. Someone notices which words make you defensive. Someone notices what drains you and what excites you. They don't need to benefit from this knowledge. They simply need to remember it. Emotion, once observed, does not disappear. It accumulates. Over time, it becomes a profile, and profiles create asymmetry. You feel, they know, you react, they anticipate, you explain, they adjust. This is the quiet architecture of dominance that never makes headlines and never needs violence. The most effective control systems are emotional, not physical. They rely on your belief that being understood is the same as being safe. It isn't. Being understood makes you predictable. Predictability is comfort for those who want to manage outcomes. When you reveal emotion freely, you reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is the one thing power cannot tolerate. That is why the emotionally expressive are encouraged to keep expressing, to keep sharing, to keep opening up. Not because it heals them, but because it stabilizes the environment around them. Their reactions become reliable. Their boundaries become visible. Their breaking points become known. They are no longer a variable. They are a constant. And constants are easy to work around. You have felt this without language for it. The strange shift after you show vulnerability. The subtle loss of leverage in conversations, where you were honest too early. The way people begin to test you. Once they know what you fear losing. You told yourself it was connection. It was exposure. Emotional openness creates intimacy only when power is equal. When it is not, it creates hierarchy. Whoever needs the emotional outcome more is already below. Whoever can walk away with less emotional consequence holds the advantage. This is not cruelty. It is gravity. Emotion pulls you toward others. Gravity pulls you downward. The one who feels more bends first. The one who bends first adapts. The one who adapts becomes useful. And usefulness in human systems is rarely rewarded with respect. It is rewarded with extraction. More time, more energy, more compliance. The predator does not announce itself. It does not snarl. It listens. It mirrors. It validates just enough to keep the signal flowing. It asks open-ended questions. It creates safe moments. It lets you talk. And while you are relieved to finally be seen, something else is happening beneath the surface. Your internal world is being translated into leverage. Not always consciously, but effectively. This is why emotional people often feel drained after interactions that seemed supportive. Energy was transferred. Information was collected. Expectations were set. You walked away lighter. The other person walked away clearer. The imbalance grows slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you are reacting while they are choosing. You are hoping while they are deciding. You are managing feelings while they are managing outcomes. Emotion was never protection because protection requires opacity. Protection requires limits. Protection requires the ability to delay response until context is fully understood. The emotionally unguarded do the opposite. They respond immediately. They seek resolution. They rush toward closure. And in doing so, they reveal urgency. Urgency is weakness in any negotiation, emotional or otherwise. The world teaches the weak to emote and the powerful to observe. Then it pretends this is morality. It calls restraint coldness. It calls control repression. It calls emotional discipline unhealthy. But notice who benefits from these labels. Systems benefit. Organizations benefit. Manipulators benefit. Anyone who needs predictability benefits. The individual does not, because the individual pays with autonomy. When you are emotionally legible, you are easier to steer. Guilt works faster. Shame cuts deeper. Praise hooks stronger. Threats land cleaner. Silence unsettles you more. You become responsive rather than strategic. This is why predators do not fear emotional people. They depend on them. Emotional expression without containment is not dangerous. It is consumable. The truly dangerous individuals are not numb. They are selective. They feel fully and reveal sparingly. Their inner reactions are real, but private. They do not leak data under pressure. They do not confess to relieve discomfort. They allow silence to do the work. Silence forces others to fill the gap, and in that gap, others expose themselves. This is the reversal you were never taught. You were told to speak your truth. You were never told to protect it. You were told to be authentic. You were never told to be unreadable. You were told vulnerability is strength. You were never told that strength without boundaries becomes a resource for others. Emotion, unmanaged, turns inward pain into outward control mechanisms. Once someone knows what you want, they can delay it. Once they know what you fear, they can hint at it. Once they know what you value, they can position themselves between you and it. And you will comply without force. You will call it compromise. You will call it love. You will call it loyalty. But beneath the language, the dynamic is simple. Information has changed hands. Power followed it. This is why the emotionally disciplined appear calm in chaos. They are not unaffected. They are uninterpretable. Others cannot read them well enough to apply pressure accurately. Pressure becomes risky when feedback is unclear, so it is avoided. This is how safety is actually created. Not through exposure, but through ambiguity. Not through expression, but through control. The weak are encouraged to empty themselves emotionally into the world, and then wonder why the world feels hostile. The world is not hostile. It is responsive. It responds to signals. You have been sending them constantly. Once you see this, you feel a quiet anger, not at others, at yourself. For how often you gave away what should have been guarded. For how often you mistook being heard for being respected. For how often you believed emotion would shield you when it was actually marking you. And that anger leads to a more unsettling realization. If emotion is information, and you have been broadcasting it for years, who has been listening the longest? Moral narratives were never created to make you free. They were created to make you manageable. This is the part no one tells you, because the moment you see it, you stop responding the way you're expected to. Morality, as it is taught to you, is not a universal truth carved into reality. It is a framework designed to regulate behavior where power is uneven. It is handed most aggressively to those who have the least leverage and praised most loudly when it produces obedience. You were taught very early what kind of person you should be before you were ever shown how the world actually works. Be kind. Be fair. Be understanding. Be patient. Be forgiving. These ideas were not neutral. They were instructions, and they were given to you long before you had any power to question who benefits from them. Moral stories are tools. They shape guilt, reward compliance, and turn internal conflict into self-policing. When you lack leverage, morality becomes the leash you hold against yourself. You don't need to be threatened. You restrain yourself automatically. You hesitate when others act. You doubt when others decide. You pause when others move forward. And while you are busy being good, others are busy being effective. This is not because they are evil. It is because effectiveness is not judged by moral purity. It is judged by outcomes. Moral narratives fill the gap where power is missing. They promise meaning instead of control. They offer virtue instead of leverage. They soothe the discomfort of powerlessness by reframing it as righteousness. You tell yourself you are better because you didn't act, cleaner because you didn't assert, safer because you didn't confront. But safety is not what morality delivers. Predictability is. When people know which lines you will not cross, they know exactly how far they can push you. Moral rigidity makes you legible. It defines your limits for others, and limits, once known, invite pressure. You feel this every time you are told to be the bigger person. That phrase is not advice. It is a command issued to the person with less leverage, the one who can't afford escalation, the one who would lose more by conflict. Morality steps in where power is absent and tells you to stand down gracefully. It reframes retreat as maturity, submission as virtue, silence as wisdom. Meanwhile, those with leverage are never asked to be bigger. They are allowed to be strategic. Their aggression is reframed as leadership, their selfishness as confidence, their refusal as boundaries. Morality does not apply equally because it was never meant to. It is enforced downward, not upward. You are encouraged to judge yourself harshly for impulses others in freely once they have status, resources, or protection. This creates a psychological trap. You begin to associate assertion with shame, desire with selfishness, anger with immaturity. You internalize restraint as identity. You become someone who doesn't push, doesn't demand, doesn't insist. And the world quietly rearranges itself around those who do. The most effective moral systems are the ones you enforce on yourself. They don't need guards or laws. They live in your hesitation. They activate the moment you consider acting in your own interest. A voice appears, calm and familiar, telling you this would make you a bad person. That voice is not conscience. It is conditioning. Conscience asks questions. Conditioning delivers conclusions. Moral narratives work best when they feel natural, unquestionable, obvious. When breaking them feels like becoming someone unrecognizable. This is how control embeds itself into identity. You don't feel oppressed. You feel responsible. Responsible for harmony. Responsible for fairness. Responsible for keeping things civil, even when they are quietly unequal. This responsibility is never distributed evenly. Those with leverage are free to abandon morality when it becomes inconvenient. They call it realism. You are expected to uphold it even when it costs you. You call it integrity. Integrity without leverage becomes liability. It locks you into patterns others can exploit without ever appearing cruel. They don't need to force you. They just wait for your values to stop you. This is why moral people often feel exhausted and resentful without knowing why. They are constantly negotiating with themselves, constantly suppressing impulses, constantly choosing restraint while watching others advance. They are told this makes them superior, but superiority that produces no influence is decorative. It exists only in narrative, not in consequence. Moral frameworks were designed to stabilize societies, not empower individuals. Stability requires predictability. Predictability requires restraint. Restraint is easiest to maintain when people believe it defines their worth. Once you believe being good matters more than being effective, you will accept loss as proof of virtue. You will wear disadvantage like a badge. You will confuse suffering with meaning. And this is where the deepest manipulation occurs. You stop resisting not because you can't, but because you believe you shouldn't. You feel guilty for wanting more. You feel ashamed for pushing back. You feel anxious when you consider crossing lines others cross without apology. Meanwhile, those others rarely think about morality until it is useful to invoke against you. Moral language becomes a weapon in their hands. They accuse. They shame. They appeal to standards they themselves violate privately. And because you believe in the standard, you comply. This is how moral narratives enforce hierarchy without force. They make the powerless argue for their own containment. None of this means morality is fake. It means morality is contextual. It means ethics without power are aspirational, not protective. It means values without leverage are requests, not boundaries. Once you see this, something uncomfortable happens. You begin to notice how often moral arguments appear only when someone wants you to stop. How quickly morality is forgotten when stopping you no longer matters. You see how flexible principles become at the top and how rigid they are at the bottom. And you begin to question which of your beliefs are truly yours and which were installed to keep you predictable. This questioning is dangerous because it destabilizes identity. You can no longer rely on being good as a compass. You realize goodness never stopped people from taking advantage of you. It only stopped you from stopping them. That realization doesn't make you cruel. It makes you alert. And alertness changes everything. Because once moral narratives lose their grip, you are left with a more difficult problem. If morality was holding you in place, what happens when you let go? You were never broken. You were shaped. Conditioned to believe that feeling deeply made you safe, that morality would shield you, that identity was something you discovered instead of something imposed. What you are experiencing now is not darkness. It is clarity arriving late. The discomfort you feel is the residue of illusions collapsing. When emotions stopped protecting you, when moral rules stopped saving you, when the identity you defended stopped serving you, something quieter took its place. Awareness. And awareness is never gentle. It strips meaning before it offers structure. It leaves you alone with the realization that no system was designed to prioritize your inner world. Only your usefulness. Only your predictability. Only your compliance. Power was never hidden. It was just never explained to you honestly. It does not announce itself with cruelty. It settles into silence. It waits for others to speak first. It lets narratives restrain those who fear being judged more than being controlled. It allows emotion to flow outward from others while it remains contained, unreadable, untouched. This is why the most influential people rarely explain themselves. Why they don't rush to be understood. Why they let ambiguity do the work. Uncertainty makes people lean in. Leaning in shifts balance. Balance decides who adjusts and who remains still. The dismantling you feel is necessary. Identity must fracture before it can be rebuilt with intention. Otherwise, you are only refining the same limitations that kept you exposed. What comes next is not kindness or cruelty. It is precision, knowing when to speak and when to withhold, knowing which values protect you and which only sound noble, knowing that control is not domination, but containment. The world will not warn you when you regain leverage. It will respond differently, quieter, slower, with caution, and that change will tell you everything you need to know.